Jonas Kahnwald isn't just the main character in Dark. He's the beginning, the end, and everything in between. He becomes the stranger, then Adam, then something even darker. This is the full twisted timeline of Jonas Kahnwald explained. So guys, hit that subscribe button and let's start at the very beginning. 2003 was the year that Jonas Kahnwald is born to Michael and Hannah Kahnwald. Sometime after that, during the 2010s, as a child, Jonas sees Martha 2 in his closet, something that he's going to forget about until the last episode of the series, so it's something we won't talk about again until the end of this video. But it does start our Jonas counter, since this is the first chronological moment of Jonas's life that we see. On June 20th, 2019, the day before Michael's self-transition, Jonas, Martha, and their friends go to the local lake, and it's there, whilst Jonas and Martha are sitting on the beach doing the will they won't they, that they find the St. Christopher necklace. But before anything can go down, Jonas has to leave to go see his grandma Inez, leaving Martha on the beach. Later that night, Jonas arrives to the Nielsen home for a party. During that party, him and Martha go to her room and begin to have a conversation. It's an awkward conversation since Martha thinks it's a continuation of a conversation she and Jonas were having on the beach, but Jonas doesn't really know what she's talking about, but they end up having sex, so score 1 for Jonas. The following day, June 21st, 2019, Michael Kahnwald, Jonas's father, unalived himself. After having the best day of his life with Martha, Jonas now has the worst day of his life with the death of his father. It affects him so much so that he has to go away for a couple of months to get psychological help. After being gone a few months, Jonas returns back to school, only to find Martha is now dating his best friend Bartosz. Jonas keeps it player and doesn't make a big deal about it, and still chooses to hang out with him. He also finds out that the local drug dealer Eric Obendorf has gone missing, and he's been missing for a few weeks. Later that night, Jonas, Bartosz, Magnus, Martha, Francesca, and Mikkel go out looking for Eric's drug stash. They make their way to the Winden Caves, then suddenly they start hearing weird sounds, flashing lights. Jonas gets a vision of his father, and suddenly Mikkel goes missing. Jonas is the last person to be seen with Mikkel. The adults are called, and now the whole town is searching for Mikkel. The next day, Jonas wakes up and notices a loose board in the ceiling of his bedroom. He finds out that it's a secret hiding spot where he finds a detailed map of the Winden Cave system. Jonas decides to go to the Winden Cave to try to follow the map and find Mikkel. He ends up in a dead end, which causes Jonas to go back home to try to figure out how to navigate the cave system until he falls asleep. While he is sleeping, a stranger walks in his room. The following day, Bartosz calls Jonas and the two of them hang out, where Bartosz tells Jonas about Noah and he says he's going to meet him and wants Jonas to come along, which Jonas agrees to. Later though, Jonas sits on a bench near his father's gravesite where he is joined by the stranger who was in his room last night. The stranger tells him that he knew his father. They talk about philosophical concepts such as labyrinths and death up until Jonas has to leave. Jonas then ends up at the high school watching Martha's play rehearsal, which causes him to ignore Bartosz's phone call to meet the dealer Noah. After rehearsals, Jonas goes to Martha's dressing room and he confesses about the mental breakdown that he suffered after his father's death, but he wants to know that if what happened between them was real. They end up kissing, and when Jonas gets home, he receives a package containing a light, a Geiger counter, and his father's suicide note that reveals that his father Michael is really the young boy Mikkel who got lost through time and ended up in 1986, where he grew up to be Jonas's father Michael, making Martha, who is Mikkel's older sister, Jonas's aunt. With this information, Jonas decides that he is going to rescue Mikkel from the past, and he takes his new equipment to the caves, where he ends up going through a passageway marked Sigmundus. And he ends up in the year 1986, where he meets a younger version of his mother Hannah and her father, his grandfather. He goes to Winden High School, where he meets a young Regina Tiedemann before meeting Officer Egon Tiedemann, who Jonas has take him to the hospital to find Mikkel. Once he gets to the hospital, he sees Mikkel talking to Inez Kahnwald, but before he can get to Mikkel, the stranger shows up again and tells him that if he takes Mikkel back, then he will never be born. Jonas decides that he's not going to rescue Mikkel once he sees his mother Hannah meeting Mikkel, his father, for the first time. He decides to go back to 2019 instead to talk to his mother about his father and the love that they shared, causing Hannah to break down into tears, which causes Jonas to burn his father's suicide letter. When Martha starts calling Jonas, he ignores her calls. Martha ends up coming over to his house under the rainfall, and wants to know why Jonas is ignoring her calls after they kissed. Jonas doesn't really explain, but he has to break it off with her. Jonas then goes to visit his grandmother Inez Kahnwald to find out if she knew Mikko was from the future and why did she not do more to save him. Inez then gives Jonas his dad's suicide letter, the same letter that Jonas just burnt earlier, but this letter seems newer and in much better condition than the one that Jonas burned. Inez then tells him that everything happens for a reason, causing Jonas to go back to Winden High, where he is confronted by Bartaj over Martha. They end up getting into a fight until Martha comes to separate the fight. Once Jonas sees her, he runs off. Now determined to change things, Jonas decides to go back to 1986 to rescue Mikko and stop himself from ever being born. Once he gets to 1986, he meets a young Charlotte before making it to the hospital, but once he gets inside Mikko's room, Noah is there waiting for him with a middle-aged version of Helge who comes from behind and knocks Jonas out. When Jonas regains consciousness, he is in the blue room that is built under the Sigmundus tunnels. The stranger shows up again, and instead of rescuing Jonas, he explains to Jonas that the room under the Sigmundus tunnel is built there because Noah is trying to harness the energy released from the Sigmundus door tunnels every time someone travels through the time to create his own time machine. He also reveals that he is Jonas but 33 years older, adding another Jonas to the Jonas counter. He also reveals that he was the one that gave Jonas the older suicide letter. Jonas then begs the stranger to let him return Mikko to 2019, but the stranger refuses and leaves Jonas locked up. While locked up in the room, a portal through time opens up caused by the stranger. In the portal, Jonas sees a young Helge, but when they try to make contact, Jonas is warped into a post-apocalyptic future in the year 2052 and is immediately captured by a girl with a scar on her face named Silja. 6 months go by with Jonas stuck in the future, making the year now 2053. While Jonas has been living in this apocalyptic future, we learned that Winden was destroyed because of an apocalyptic event that happened in 2020. Jonas also learns about the God particle by listening to tapes left behind by Claudia Tiedemann, who was also learning how to activate the time machine. While Jonas was walking through the future, he is then captured and hanged by future Elizabeth, who tells him that it is forbidden to enter the dead zone and they must wait for the prophecy. Later that night though, Silja helps Jonas escape and they sneak into the dead zone and find the time machine. They get it working with the God particle stabilizing and Jonas travels through it. Jonas then wakes up in a wheat field in the year 1921, where he is met by two men who take him to an inn where he meets a young Agnes Nielsen, who is Jonas's great-great-grandmother on his father's side, as well as meeting a young Noah. After a brief conversation with this young Noah, Jonah tries to go back to the Sigmundus tunnels in the caves. However, the tunnels have not been built yet. Young Noah meets him outside of the cave and tells him that the tunnel will not be built for another 32 years, but he will take Jonas to meet Sigmundus, the travelers. Young Noah brings Jonas to a church where they meet older Noah. The Noahs then take Jonas to meet Adam, who reveals to Jonas that he is an even older version of Jonas. That makes 3 Jonases on the Jonas counter now. Adam tells Jonas that his body is scarred from years of time travel without the hazmat suit, and he proves to Jonas that he is the future version of him by showing him that they have the same scar from being hanged by Elizabeth in the year 2053. Jonas breaks down looking at what he will become, but Adam tells them they can change it all. Adam lets it be known that there may be a possibility of a loophole to stop the apocalypse and save everyone. Adam explains to Jonas that they are fighting a war against time. As the conversation goes on, Adam tells Jonas that he knows he doesn't believe Adam because he was once Jonas, and everything Jonas is thinking of, he knows because he once thought it. So Adam then shows Jonas he completed a time machine and sends Jonas to June 20th, 2019, the day before Michael Kahnwald kills himself, to stop him and end the time loop. Jonas arrives on June 20th, 2019, and as he's traveling through Winden, he runs into Ulrich, Katarina, and Mikko, who asks why isn't he at the lake with his friends, which prompts Jonas to go to the lake, and he watches his younger version talk to Martha before leaving her on the beach to go visit his grandma Inez. Jonas covers his scars with his raincoat and goes to speak with 2019 Martha, professing his love for her by letting her know and I quote, "I think we're a perfect match. Never believe anything else," before they share a kiss. This conversation is the conversation that Martha was alluding to earlier when she was talking to Jonas the night that they slept together, which is why Jonas was so confused that night. Him and Martha hadn't yet had that conversation from his perspective. After professing his love to Martha and being the best wingman to his younger self, he makes his way to his house to talk to his father and try to convince him not to kill himself by letting him know that he knows that Michael is Mikkel. Michael then reveals what happened to him that night when he went missing in the Winden Caves. He says that after all the noise and lights flickering, he got separated from Jonas, but it was Jonas who found him again and led him to the caves in the first place and left him in 1986. This confuses Jonas because he doesn't remember any of this. Future Claudia Tiedemann then shows up and explains to Jonas that Michael has to die in order for Jonas to be born. Michael realizes that his death triggers his younger self to go missing and eventually giving life to his son Jonas, who he loves very much. Michael decides to write the suicide letter and take his own life to make sure that his son can be born. Jonas then leaves with Claudia, where he spends the next year training with her. And it's during this year of training with Claudia that Jonas leads Mikkel into the caves, sending him back to 1986. Jonas then travels to 1987 to get middle-aged Claudia so that he can train her to become the Claudia that will eventually train him, creating another paradox. They take some cesium from the radioactive barrels in the caves and they travel to the year 2020, moments before the apocalypse happens. Jonas explains what he knows to Claudia and he leaves the time machine with her as he goes to find his mom and Martha to save them before the apocalypse. When he gets home, his mom Hannah is already gone, but he meets Martha and he confesses everything to her, but she already knows. However, Adam shows up as the apocalypse is beginning and shoots Martha in the chest, killing her, while telling Jonas that this is how things are meant to be. This is where things get super interesting here. This creates a nexus point in time called superposition time, where different possibilities can exist at the same time. So later in the video, we will be returning to this point in time to see the different possibilities that Jonas has to follow in order for the story to progress. The first possibility is what happens when we follow the show linearly. As the world shakes due to the apocalypse, Jonas is still with Martha's dead body. Suddenly, another Martha walks in. We'll call her Aunt Martha. She then tells him she's not who he thinks she is. Before she pulls out her time machine device, Jonas asks her, what time is she from? And she responds, not what time, but from what world, causing them to dimension travel right before the apocalypse destroys everything. Jonas and Aunt Martha make it to world number 2, which is an alternate universe where Aunt Martha promises she will fix everything by bringing him to the date where they both met, and she disappears, leaving him in this world. Jonas goes home only to find out that he doesn't exist in this world. He meets a younger Aunt Martha, who we'll call Martha 2 to avoid confusion. Jonas thinks this is the same Martha, but this Martha doesn't know him. Confused with no idea what to do next, Jonas is approached by an older woman who explains to Jonas that in this universe, Mikkel never traveled back in time, so Jonas was never born. The woman then reveals that she is the future Martha 2. She then explains to Jonas that both their worlds are parallel to each other, one where Jonas exists and one where he doesn't. But even though they're separate worlds, both these worlds are still destroyed by the very same apocalypse. Eva, as this older Martha 2 is called, convinces Jonas to teach her younger self everything he knows about time travel so that they can stop the apocalypse. Jonas then goes to find Martha 2 and he takes her to the caves, but instead of saying Mundus, the cave doors now read Erit Lux. The two of them travel through the cave, and when they come out, the world is a wasteland. But they are met by another adult version of Martha who welcomes them to 33 years in the future. We'll call this Martha Stranger Martha because at this point, we're up to 4 Marthas. Stranger Martha explains that they have to stop the apocalypse from happening in this world and that Jonas cannot save his own world. Jonas and Martha 2 go back through the cave and end up back in 2019. Once they get to Martha 2's house, they realize that their love for each other crosses through dimensions and they make love. However, Jonas decides that he can't just live with Martha 2. He has to try to save his own Martha that was killed by Adam. Martha 2 decides to help him and they break into the power plant to get more cesium. Martha 2 ends up getting a cut on her face by going through the fence, which causes Jonas to realize that he is turning Martha 2 into Eva, which prompts him to change his mind and follow the path Eva told him that would save his world, which causes him and Martha 2 to get into an argument once Martha 2 realizes Jonas only cares about his world and his Martha. He doesn't care what happens to her or her world. They get back to Eva's base, where they are met by Eva, stranger Eva. Eva let them know that Jonas has accomplished everything that they needed from him, which essentially is making love to Martha 2 and impregnating her with their unborn child. This causes Aunt Martha from the season 2 finale to show up and kill Jonas in front of younger Martha 2, thus ending the life of Jonas that we've been following since the first episode and putting Martha down the path to eventually become Ava. But if we go back to the day of the apocalypse, there's another possibility that could happen. The other possibility at this nexus point is that Martha 2 never shows up. Instead, Jonas runs to the basement of his house and survives the apocalypse. He later meets with middle-aged Claudia Tiedemann, and together they spend the next 32 years working on the God particle, creating the very recordings that Jonas was listening to in 2053 when he was trying to recreate the time machine. After years of working on the God particle and even trying to kill himself, this Jonas is the Jonas that grows up to become the stranger. Noah, Jonas, and Claudia spend the next few years together working on the time machine until Noah's baby is taken. He believes Jonas is responsible for his missing baby, which causes them to become enemies. Claudia and Jonas finally get the God particle working, and they send Jonas back to 2019, where Jonas becomes the stranger that was interacting with his younger self. And he's the one we saw that snuck into Jonas's room while he was sleeping earlier in the video. We see stranger Jonas meet his younger self at his father's gravesite to talk about the philosophy of the labyrinths. Stranger Jonas also goes back to 1986 to convince his younger self to leave Mikko in 1986. We see him give the time machine to H.G. Tannhaus, as well as discuss time travel with him. We then see stranger Jonas approach his younger self that was trapped in the blue room, and he's the reason why the wormhole was created in the first place that launched Jonas into 2052 after touching Helge. After his younger self had been missing for about 6 months, stranger Jonas ends up telling his mother, Hannah, that he is Jonas. He then takes her to 1987 to prove to her that time travel is real. He also ends up revealing his true identity to other people around town, such as Charlotte, Peter, as well as Katarina, before he confronts his mother about her affair with Ulrich, which causes Hannah to steal his time machine and abandon her son, which is why when the younger Jonas went home to find his mom to save her from the apocalypse, she was no longer there. She had already stolen his future time machine. Without his time machine, Jonas decides that he's going to try to save Martha from the apocalypse, and he uses a gun while also telling her about time travel. He is then given another time machine by Katarina, who got her hands on the time machine that Bartosz was given by Noah, but by the time the apocalypse is happening, Martha is no longer in the bunker, forcing Jonas to have to save Bartosz, Magnus, Francesca, Noah by time traveling in order to save Martha. So Jonas uses the time machine before the apocalypse happens, sending them all back to the year 1888. Jonas and everyone who went with him were now trapped in 1888 as they didn't have any more cesium to power their current time machine. Jonas ends up meeting Gustav Tannhaus. Together with the others, they form Sigmundus as they begin working on creating a time machine. While in 1888, he meets Aunt Martha for the first time. This is the same Aunt Martha that saved Jonas from the apocalypse. Aunt Martha gives him some cesium, which causes him to spend years trying to create the time machine. And that's how he starts to get the scars that turn him into Adam. 23 years later, in 1911, he reunites with his mother Hannah, who introduces him to his younger sister Silja, which causes Jonas to snap and kill his mom, because she stole the time machine, essentially putting him in this predicament in the first place. But now with access to a time machine, he sends his little sister Silja to the future so that she can be there in 2052 to help his younger self time travel back to 1921. Now, Jonas has fully become Adam and begins manipulating everyone through time so that he can cause the apocalypse of both worlds to hopefully distort his time loop once and for all. That's when adult Noah returns to try to kill Adam for not telling him about his daughter Charlotte. But Agnes kills Noah for Adam. Adam then decides to travel to the year 2020, the day of the apocalypse, so that he can shoot Martha in front of his younger self, triggering him to go down the path to eventually end up becoming Adam. Adam Jonas then leaves and travels to the year 2053. In 2053, he sends Charlotte and Elizabeth to kidnap Charlotte from Noah in 2041 to bring her to 1971 to be raised by H.G. Tannhaus, making Noah right all along that Jonas was responsible for his missing baby. He also sends Magnus and Francesca to bring Aunt Martha from 2020 to 1888 to give him the cesium so that he could start his time travel experiments. Once that's done, he tried to use the energy from both apocalypses while killing Aunt Martha 2 while she was pregnant with her child, which was conceived when Martha 2 and Jonas slept together. Despite all that, it doesn't work and Adam's plans fail. He is then met by future Claudia. This creates another nexus point or superposition time, which causes two possible outcomes. One possibility is if Claudia tells him about the origin world that was destroyed by the creation of time travel by H.G. Tannhaus, with that information, Adam Jonas is going to travel back to 2020 after he killed Martha and rescue his younger self, adding another Jonas to the Jonas counter. He also tells the young Jonas that he and Martha 2 have to go to the origin world and stop Tannhaus from creating the original time machine. Adam will then go to meet Eva for the first time, but he doesn't kill her, and both of them are erased from existence when younger Jonas and Martha 2 make it to the origin world and stop Tannhaus from ever creating time travel. However, if we go back to that same nexus point after meeting Claudia, if Adam doesn't learn about the origin world, he's going to travel to Eva and kill her. That's when young Martha 2 sees this and she goes on the path to becoming Eva that Adam just killed. Going back to the apocalypse nexus point one more time, the Jonas that is saved by Adam ends up going to meet Martha 2, stopping her from meeting adult Magnus and Francesca, which stops Martha 2 from going back to 1888. Thus never giving Jonas the cesium so he never becomes Adam. This Jonas and Martha 2 end up traveling to 1971 in the origin world, and that's how when Jonas was a child he was able to see Martha for the first time through space and time. When they get to 1971 in the origin world, they save H.G. Tannhaus' family, and with his family surviving, H.G. never creates the time machine, which never creates the time superposition that created both Jonas's world or Martha 2's world, erasing both of them from existence. And with that, all the Jonases no longer exist. And guys, this has been the entirety of Jonas's timeline from the day he was born to all the versions of Jonas ceased to exist. And this was a lot. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about this in the comment section below. And guys, if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and until next time, peace.